change the subject or do something neutral like breathing meditation. On several occasions, we have even asked the Satanist to stand up, read a few passages from the Satanic Bible, and try to explain it to us. As it turned out, he was a really nice guy. He has a big heart. He's very hard on himself, but very caring and considerate of others. He's another person that I don't know where he is tonight. I'm especially grateful to a wonderful woman by the name of Catherine Paredes. She's sitting right over there in that blue shirt. She helps out every Wednesday night with our 2 groups. She isn't even a Buddhist. Catherine is involved with the Human Kindness Foundation, which personally corresponds and sends spiritual literature to thousands of prisoners every year. Once Catherine brought this huge bag of candy kisses. So we walked around and handed them out to everybody. And we encouraged them to come to group that night. It gave us a way to make personal contact with every single person on campus, and it made them all smile. I told Catherine, I hope this works. And looking out at all the people enjoying their candy, Catherine said, smiling, it already has, Kiley. Duh. So after this experience, it has become a part of her practice to go out and give every single person a candy kiss. This is another great thing about all this. We have no idea what we're doing. We never know from week to week how many people are going to show up, what we're going to talk about, or anything. But I tell you this, although nothing is predictable, when it's working, you know it. When everyone is participating and the energy is flowing and spontaneous interactions are taking place, you can feel it. So I want to add this little observation, and perhaps someone will find it helpful or interesting. The reason I insist on these groups being a mutual effort and a communal experience is because of something I witnessed over and over when I was doing meditation on the streets. And that's of a well-meaning church group pulling up under the bridge, unloading a bunch of sound equipment, plugging in a generator, turning up the monitors, turning up the mics, and spending the next hour and a half playing music at, preaching at, and singing at the homeless. Then they'd pass out a few sandwiches and leave. I never want to forget the feeling under that bridge after they were gone. It was like you had been caught in a violent thunderstorm, and when it passed, everything got too quiet, and you were left terribly shaken up. The church service was something that happened to you, not something that you were a part of. At this point, there isn't really much I can say about HMP without telling you a little bit about my story. May 10th, 2006 was a banner day for me. I woke up hungover for hopefully the last time. I drank myself out of a marriage, a home, and the trust of my children and my self-respect. And for the first time, I was absolutely alone. Me and my ex-wife had met when I was 18, married when we were 22, and we had our first child when I was 23. I did not have a lot of spare time to get to know myself before our marriage. And the person that I had become didn't seem to be worth knowing now. But I had to look myself right square in the eyes and admit the wreck I had made out of everything. It was terribly hard to stop drinking and face all this mess, but it seemed even harder to keep going the way I was. Many years later, I would read a Buddhist quote that summed up this period in my life perfectly. Ajahn Khan says, there is a suffering that leads to the end of suffering and a suffering that leads to more suffering. If you are afraid to face the first kind of suffering, you will surely continue to face the second. It had slowly, painfully become clear what heartache I had caused myself and others. I was wading through the guilt, the shame, the depression, the resentments, and a million other feelings that the alcohol had been hiding all these years. After we sold the house, the money paid off some debts, but I was barely able to afford a dingy little apartment. I was living alone for the first time without a spouse telling me what to do and without the kids' activities planning my day. I know that probably sounds pretty good to some of you right now, but at the time it was extremely painful. If I read to you some of the poems I wrote during that period, we would all probably commit suicide right now. One Saturday morning, with nothing better to do but sit in that lonely apartment and slip slowly into madness, I knew I had to get out of the house or I was going to go crazy, drink, or both. I live in Floresville, which is about 30 miles south of here. I was driving an old beat-up clunker of a truck that was held together by wishful thinking and food stamps. It was so bad on gas that you had to get a loan to drive it around the block. I remember asking a guy once where the nearest gas station was, and he said, "You just passed one about a mile back." And I said, "Nope, I already filled up there. Where's the next one?" But still, I had to get out of that house, so I drove to San Antonio, and I wandered into the antiquarian book mart on Broadway, which is right next to the half-price books. I spent several hours there sitting on the floor with half a dozen spiritual and self-help books scattered all around me. When I decided that I'd been there long enough, I didn't want to look like an idiot and walk out without buying something, so I grabbed the only book I could afford. It was $1.20, and I think I had $1.25 in my pocket. And to tell you the truth, I didn't even know what the book was about, but the cover conveyed some type of peace, and I thought it might have something to do with Zen Buddhism. When I arrived home to my empty, filthy, tiny, stinky little apartment, I sat down and looked it over. And what I quickly realized was that it was nothing that a redneck from Runge, Texas like myself would ever find even remotely interesting. The book was called Selling Water by the River, and it was mostly just an English translation of some training manual written for Japanese monks sometime around 1244 A.D., by the founder of Soto Zen, a guy named Dojin. I noticed that he tackled the big questions that we all ask, like how young monks should behave in the presence of senior monks, and the rules and regulations during mealtime, proper conduct in the meditation hall, and last but not least, detailed instructions for the head cook for the preparation of all meals. Interesting stuff, I know. But I read the entire book from cover to cover in one sitting, totally enraptured. I saw great beauty in the type of self-control, discipline, and attention to detail that Dojin wrote about. It was so clearly lacking in my own life. And when I turned the last page, I discovered that the previous owner had placed a sticker with his name and address printed on it there. Without much thought, I got out a piece of paper. I wrote the previous owner a letter. I expressed to him how much I enjoyed the book, and that I didn't know what series of events had occurred that had brought the book into my possession, but I was glad that it did. I walked the 2 blocks down to the post office, mailed the letter, walked back home, and went to bed. It was about 4 o'clock in the morning. Within 3 business days, I received a reply letter back from this man. He explained to me that he didn't even remember owning the book, that he had a vast library, and he suspected that one of his friends had borrowed the book and ended up selling it. He said that if I wanted to learn more about Buddhism and meditation, I should meet up with him at the Shambhala Center on St. Mary's Street. So I started going, but he was never there. And when I would miss, someone would say that he had been there and I missed him. Interestingly enough, to this day, I've never met the man that owned that book. And the last I heard, he had moved to Houston. Now, I don't want to ruin this story for anyone, but looking back on it now and writing this, at first he might have been very excited to receive a letter from a certain lonely someone named Kiley, who was going through a terrible divorce and was desperate enough to write a letter to a complete stranger. I seriously don't recall putting anything in that letter that would have gave away my gender. Although